When Moses asked God, "What is your name?" because he wanted to report to the children of Israel, who is this God that's been speaking to him? And God spoke to him. He said, "I am that I am." Now you think about Moses and how he felt at that moment. I mean, if God comes to you and he says, "I am," it's kind of like, and I'm not, It's so overwhelming. And we're really talking today about, I guess, almost the advantages of having Jehovah God as our God. There's all kinds of religions in the world, all kinds of gods, all kinds of things that people worship, but there's some major, obviously, differences between the one and true living God, the great I am, and all of these other man-made gods. And of course, one of the major differences is the whole eternal perspective of God, is the whole infinity perspective of God that none of the other gods have, being man-made. Today we're going to talk about some of the parameters of what God has given us to understand and what He has not given us to understand. He is an eternal, infinite God. And you and I live in the time and the space of this present day in this world. And when it comes to us understanding the eternal, infinite perspective, it says that we cannot fathom the mysteries of God. Let me talk to you for a minute about the constraints of time and space. Let's begin with the idea of God's foreknowledge. Now, when you think of God's foreknowledge, basically He is an eternal God. We are locked into time and space. God is living in eternity and in infinity. So I want you to imagine God looking at the timeline of your life like this. It's like this train that goes across the trestle. He's looking at the beginning of your life and at the end of your life. And we can't say He's looking at it at the same time. He's not looking in time. He's looking at it. He sees it. He always sees it. He always will see it, and He always did see it. All right? And so when we begin to understand some of the things about the foreknowledge of God, we have such a tendency as men to bring that into our concept of finite time and space. When you think about foreknew, basically all it means is I knew you ahead of time. And God knew us before He made the foundation. He said that He called us with a purpose before He laid the foundations of the world. And when you think about that, God being eternal and infinite, He looks into time, and time to Him appears like what? A box? A set of parentheses? I'm not sure. Maybe it's like the train on this railroad bridge where He's looking at the whole thing. And you know that God sees the beginning from the end, doesn't He? Because He's not limited by time. We are. We're constrained to thinking and interpreting in time. In fact, when people say eternity, well, that's a long time. No, it isn't. It's not time at all. Or infinity. Oh, that's a long ways from here. No, it isn't. Infinity is unfathomable to the natural man. We just can't get it. And that's the problem that we have. When He's talking about His foreknowledge, He says it's a mystery that you cannot understand with the natural mind. Only the Spirit, only by faith can you understand what He's talking about here. All right, so when God looks at time, He looks at the whole thing at once. He created it. It is a creation of His. All right, so when you think about God, how old is He? Does He have a birthday? No, He doesn't. Will He be any older this year than He was last year? No, He won't. He's always existed, always will exist. The fact is that these two do not come into agreement on the same level, on the same plane. All right? We think and calculate in a two-dimensional plane. Basically, we see three-dimensional, we think, but actually perception is just a triangulation that happens because we got two eyes, right? But we calculate everything on two dimensions, and we can make calculations in three dimensions, but we cannot go beyond that. And we soon come to the line of impossible to understand by the finite mind. And this is one of the issues when it comes to understanding the foreknowledge, the predestination, a God who is absolutely eternal. God calls it a mystery. But see, what happens is if we take predestination, foreknowledge, or any of those aspects of eternity that God's talking about and try to bring them into a finite or confined by the way we measure time and space, we will end up with a puzzle. We end up with a mess. And you see verses in the Bible like a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. Well, it's not really that it's measured like that. In fact, it's an unmeasurable thing. We cannot measure eternity or God by time and space. So the foreknowledge of God is simply God's ability to see the whole thing at once. And in that sense, He sees your yesterday, your today, and your tomorrow all at the same time. And so what happens now, if we want to bring that back into time and space, then we have to say, then He already knows what's going to happen. And this is where the idea of predestination of what's going to happen has already been done. But I want you to look at this train again. When God is looking at this train, and let's say that each one of those cars is one of your decisions, right? It's a choice that you're going to make when you come to it. When that train comes to a certain spot on the track, you make that decision. And God sees all that ahead of time. The question is he reading those decisions and acting accordingly? Or is he writing those decisions and predestinating, prefixing everything that's going to happen? The problem is if we think by trying to bring God into finite time that he already knows the beginning from the end and so that it cannot be changed. See, that's only a thought that happens in time and space. That doesn't happen in eternity. God can do whatever he wants in eternity. He's not confined by time and space, all right? I want you to understand this, because what happens is if we think the decisions are already made, then there's no more responsibility on us. If we think the decisions are already made, then it doesn't matter what we do, we can't change it. But that's not the case. God is reading your decisions. He's not writing your decisions when he sees that train go across the bridge, all right? So when you come to a place in your life to make a decision, you make a choice not based on predestination, not based on something that's already been fixed. Predestination is not a pre-writing of everything that's going to happen. What it is a destination that you are given ahead of time. I want you to go to Bangkok, wherever it may be. You have a destination. Whether you get there or not is up to you. It's up to your choices. It's up to a lot of different things. It's up to things that go wrong, and are you going to be willing to fix them and, keep persevering and all those sort of things. And it's the same thing. I mean, salvation is given to you, but are you going to get there? It's your choice, absolutely 100%. Well, doesn't God see if I'm going to be saved or not? Yeah, he does, but he's not bringing that into the equation of what you have to choose and what you have to decide today. I want you to understand this, okay? Foreknowledge is what God sees from the beginning to the end. It's not constrained by time. And then predestination comes as, okay, there's the foreknowledge of God. He sees the possibility, sees everything that's going to happen. And now he says, here's the destination I'm giving you. And what destination did he give us? I've predestined you to be conformed to the image of my Son. He's not saying that I didn't foreknow everybody. He's not saying that I only predestined some. In fact, he's not even mentioning such a foolish idea that he's predestined some to heaven and some to hell. That's a deduction of men who are caught in the constraints of time and space when God says that I know what's going to happen before it happens. And we say, okay, well then he already knows who's going to be saved, so he already knows who isn't going to be saved. Because he knows that, he must have already decided it. He's already chosen it. Hogwash. It depends on our choice 100%. God has not pre-chosen. And so when he sees that train going across the trestle, he is not writing the decisions that you make. He is reading the decisions that you make and using that information way ahead of time to bring blessing to you. God says, you do not have a right to look at it the way I look at it. You are confined to time and space, and that's where you will stay. He's serious about this. There's no way that we can play God. And that's what happens. See, sometimes in the end, if you get too weird in predestination, pretty soon somebody, who is it? I forget the guy's name, is deciding who gets saved and who doesn't get saved. He decides if you're a Christian or not. No, I decide. It's up to me. Whosoever will may come. Whoever confesses, believes, can be saved.